In this video, we'll check out what's new in Blender 4.2, which was just released. As always, CGDive will be focusing on rigging and animation, but I'll try to summarize some of the other notable updates as well. Before we get into it, I want to mention CGDive's add-on directory, which helps you discover cool Blender resources. Check it out on addons.cgdive.com. We'll start with changes in Armatures. I'll create a bone, scale it up and subdivide it. And now if I look at the bone names, the first one is called bone, which was the original name of the bone that I created. And the next one is called bone 001. The next one 002, 003, and 004 in sequence. And this is logical, so you may be thinking, so what? Well, until now, until Blender 4.1, if I do the same thing, I'll get bone 004, 003, 002, and 001. So in a reverse order. This was a long-standing annoyance and it is now fixed. And something else that is really cool, I'm going to create a circle mesh and set it as a custom object for one of my bones. So what is new is this wire width setting, and if I increase it, you'll see that my wireframe will get thicker. This is really nice and it is something that I've wished for. Of course, I can give my shape colors and so on. Next we have updates in motion paths. In pose mode, I'm going to select this bone and give it a little animation. Now if I go to motion paths and calculate, you'll see that the motion path line is black before the current frame and blue after the current frame. I believe that was already the case in previous versions, but now we can go to display and enable custom colors. And now we'll have a special color for the frames before the current one and for the ones after, which I can change to anything I like. So this should be a very welcome update for animators. And another related update, I'll disable custom colors and notice that each keyframe is represented by a dot, which is black. If I go to Edit Preferences, Themes, 3D Viewport, find the vertex entry and change its color, you'll notice that that changes the color of the keyframe dots. Just keep in mind that this is the vertex color. So if I have a mesh in the scene, in edit mode, the same setting also changes the color of the mesh vertices. Next, in all animation editors, we have a new option under View to frame the scene range. So what it does is if I zoom out here and go to View, Frame Scene Range, it will fit the existing frame range on my screen. So if I expand the end and do it again, it will show the active frame range. And you'll find this in all animation editors. In Dope Sheet, under View, Frame Scene Range, Graph Editor, Frame Scene Range, NLA, and even in the video sequencer and so on. Everything that has a timeline will have this. Another armature related update is that bones can now become active even if they're hidden. So if I hide bone 004, select another bone, make another bone active, and then go to the armature and expand the hierarchy and find bone 004 and select it from here, I will make it active and I will be able to tweak its properties. Apparently that wasn't possible until now. In the graph editor, the ease operator was improved. If I select this keyframe and press Alt-D and choose ease, we'll have the curve blend, which we already had in a previous version, but now it's supposed to create a nicer S-curve. And we also have a sharpness option. And increasing it will create a sharp angle for this curve. And another small fix is that if we switch to stick mode and give this bone a custom color, this color will be visible in edit mode. That wasn't the case until Blender 4.1. There was a fix to the limit rotation constraint. If I give this bone a limit rotation, enable X in local space, and set it to something like 0 to 180, and enable legacy behavior to show what we used to have until now, I have the bone to XYZ Euler, and I'm going to start rotating on the X-axis, and as soon as it reaches 108 degrees, it will just flip to its original position. If I disable legacy behavior, then I can go beyond 180. However, if I keep going, it will flip eventually. So I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like that, or maybe there is still a problem. But anyway, keep legacy behavior off and you'll get a more stable limit rotation constraint. Legacy behavior is meant to ensure that rigs from all the Blender versions, which may have used hacks to address this limit rotation issue, will still behave the same way. But for new rigs, just keep it off. We have a new keyframe type called generated. If I press I to insert a keyframe for this bone, I can then right-click, go to keyframe type, and you'll see the new generated type. It is available here in the timeline and also in the dope sheet. Of course, you can use this for anything you like, but officially, this keyframe type is meant for add-ons which create procedural animation. So add-ons that automatically insert keyframes should use this keyframe type. And I believe I saw that AutoRig Pro makes use of this. And I also believe the official Copy Global Transform add-on will create this type of keyframes. There is a nice fix in the pose library. Here I have some poses, such as a fist pose, which are meant for the left hand. So I can select this pose, drag, and apply this pose. And something that used to be possible, but was broken in Blender 4.1, was the ability to select the other hand, hold Ctrl, click on this pose, and apply it to the opposite hand. When I right-click on a pose, we also have a new Blend Pose Flipped operator, which does the same. If you prefer the context menu, then you have a choice. And here is a very nice workflow update for drivers in Blender 4.2. I have a simple driver which moves this bone on the y-axis when I rotate this other bone. Now let's say that I want to copy this same driver to the remaining bones. I can select all of them, then shift select the bone that does have the driver, right-click on the driven property, and choose Copy Driver to Selected. Now all of these bones will have the same driver. And here is one more update which is not related to animation and rigging, but I believe it will be interesting to CJ Dive viewers. And that is new export options which allow us to set specific collections for export. I have a couple of collections here, and let's say that the only one that I really want to export is the one that contains Suzanne. I could select that collection and go to the collection properties. You will find a new area called Exporters. With the plus button, I can define the format that I want to export to. So for example, FBX. And that will give me all of the common FBX options, and I can set them exactly as I want. And I can keep adding other formats like GLTF, for example. Or I can make another collection be exported by another format like Alembic. So you can create very complex export workflows this way. To actually export based on these collection settings, you go to File and Export All Collections. Now, if I go to a new file and import the FBX that was exported, it will be exactly only Suzanne. So this is very cool, and it can be a huge time saver if you work with other DCCs and you often need to export data out of Blender, because it allows you to set what will be exported exactly and also the export settings. These export settings that you set here will be saved in your blend file, unlike the default export settings, which are reset every time you reopen Blender. And here is something else that you may find interesting as a rigger. I have this character mesh object, with a subdivision modifier. Now if I go to this specials menu, there is a new pin to last option. I'll enable it and that will give me this pin icon. Now if I add any other modifiers, they will all be added below the subdivision modifier. In other words, the pinned modifier will always be at the bottom. So now as a practical example, I can select the mesh and shift select the rig, press Ctrl P with automatic weights, and now the armature modifier will be below the subdivision modifier. Without this, if I undo and parent again, the armature modifier will be below the subdivision modifier, which is kind of useless and just slows down your scene, so you have to manually rearrange it. But with this new setting, it will no longer be necessary. And while we are here, there is something else that is new. I'll duplicate this character and select both meshes. And now let's say that I want to apply the subdivision modifier on both meshes. Until now that was impossible, we had to do it individually for each mesh, but now I can just hold Alt and click Apply, and the modifier will be applied on both meshes. And the same is true for all other options. For example, I can Alt and click on Duplicate, and that will duplicate the subdivision modifier on both meshes. This Alt and click technique is something that you can use throughout Blender. I have a separate video about that. What is new is that it now works here with the modifier options. Now let's see what other updates there are. We just went over most of animation and rigging. Of course, the big news in this release is Eevee. Eevee Next has now become the official real-time renderer for Blender. And this is huge for me because personally I don't like offline rendering. Cycles is awesome, I just cannot wait for 5 minutes per frame for an animation. So anything that makes real-time rendering better and more beautiful is welcome news. So now we have global illumination, improvements in lights and shadows and shading and so on. I'm sure there will be many other videos talking about this, so I won't go into detail. Just keep in mind that this is a huge update. So if you bring your old scenes into 4.2, they may look different. And there is a migration guide that you can follow, but I'm not sure if you can get 100% compatible results. We also have improvements in the compositor. Namely, it can now be GPU accelerated. And that means that we can render real-time effects even faster. Again, great news for me personally. There are CPU optimizations as well, and lots of added and improved nodes. On the core, we have improvements in undo speed. This is definitely nice. This is kind of important to know if you use portable installations, which I do a lot. Until now, we had to create a special config folder. Now instead, this folder needs to be called portable. We have cycles improvements. Lots of people were demonstrating the ray portals, they look awesome. But again, I'm more interested in real-time rendering. Extensions are another huge update. I made an early reaction video when 4.2 was still in alpha and I didn't like what I saw, but since then the developers made great improvements and now I actually like what I see with the extensions. I'll definitely make a separate video about that because there are some changes in how we install add-ons now and it will probably lead to some confusion, so I'll try to cover this in depth. We have improvements in geometry nodes, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm smart enough to understand this. The improvements in import and export look kind of cool. We can now use collections to limit what is being exported. And we have various improvements in various file types. GLTF is being very actively developed, and as always, there are a lot of new features. I'm sure you'll find many videos about the modeling features and sculpting features. Python API, not really my thing, so skipping this. And the video sequencer has performance improvements. Again, I'm very happy about that. And the interface has also been improved and it looks really nice now. Personally, I'm using DaVinci Resolve for editing, but I really like what I'm seeing here. Thank you for watching, and if you would like to support CG Dive, please like, subscribe, and check out our other projects. Advanced courses on academy.cgdive.com and Blender resource directory on addons.cgdive.com.